Welcome to the show, Destri. Destri.
Yes.
So, what is your sober date?
October 1st, 2023.
October 1st, 2023.
Yeah, so I just
So,
hit my 1 year the beginning of this month.
I had 6 months after I had a relapse. So, I just hit 6 months on October 1st.
Oh, nice.
Um, what was going on September 30th of 2023?
Um, I actually went into rehab that day. I had a meeting with my probation officer, and I was using fentanyl, smoking fentanyl, and I was super late to my PO, and I ended up like nodding out in my bathroom for like 2 hours. And once I got to my PO's office, I was like, okay, like I don't want to do this anymore. Can we please get me some help? And he got me right into this place called Streams of Recovery in Idaho. And yeah, and then I got on Suboxone and I've been clean ever since.
That's awesome. Congrats. I know it's not easy. I know firsthand it's not easy.
Yeah.
Um, so, where are you? You're from Idaho, you said?
Yeah. I live in like the Idaho Falls area of Idaho. Pretty redneck, hick town.
And you've been there your whole life?
Mostly I grew up in Wyoming and then we moved here when I was about 10 or 11, so yeah.
So a little bit of both. Wyoming. I've been to Wyoming. It's like the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. For sure. Idaho's not much different, so.
Now, do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have I'm the youngest. I have a half brother and then I have an older sister.
Okay, same dads or same moms?
Same dad. We all have the same dad.
Okay,
My sister and I, both parents, and then my brother, we just have the same dad, so.
okay. So there was a divorce in there.
Yeah, she's actually it's really funny. She's a murderer and she's in prison. So, yeah, pretty
Your
crazy.
mom is.
No, not my mom. My brother's mom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she did threaten to kill my mom like oh my gosh. But yeah. So,
So
it
she like straight up murdered somebody.
yeah, she ended up dating this other guy that she worked with, and they kind of broke up, and he was dating another woman, and she went and injected her with meth and insulin, and yeah, and it killed her.
How do you inject somebody with both? Did she like hold her down?
So she had, I think it was her niece and her niece's boyfriend. Yeah, her niece and her niece's boyfriend. She had them help her hold this lady down and inject her with this stuff. Yeah, it's insane.
So they, I hope, got accessory to murder then.
Yeah, I think her niece actually just got out a couple years ago. The boyfriend I think is still in, but the niece was only like 16 or 17 when she was involved. But yeah, she'll be in prison for the rest of her life. The niece just got out. She actually lives in Idaho Falls where I live. Um and yeah, the boyfriend's still in jail or in prison as far as I know. So,
That's fucking wild.
yeah, it's pretty insane.
And yeah, it could have easily been your dad.
Yeah, exactly. Or my mom or like so I've been to prison a couple times and I like she's just in a town over. So like she's like not even an hour away. And if I were to go to that specific prison, she would see my last name and she has nothing to lose. So I don't know what she would do if I ever went to prison where she's at.
Yeah, I mean, you've been there to visit her?
No, I've been locked up like myself. I've been to they call them riders in Idaho Falls, or not in Idaho Falls, but in Idaho. They're riders. It's like a treatment program in prison. And I've been on two of those.
Oh, so when you said you went to prison, you mean you actually
Yeah, I actually just got out, last year in August. So
we'll catch up to that. So you're the youngest of three,
yes.
and you growing up Wyoming, and then you moved to Idaho when you were 10.
Yeah.
Um, when did you first discover drugs or alcohol? Which came first?
Um, I mean, my dad always kind of drank, but never, like, a lot. I mean, both my parents drank, but never, like, insane
Alcoholically.
amounts.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. It'd be like when we were camping and stuff, but, I think it was kind of I started smoking cigarettes because it was my friend's birthday, and we were all hanging out, and they all smoked, and I was like, "Oh, I wanna try it." And then I started smoking cigarettes, and then I think I started drinking around that same time, and then around that time, I started smoking weed as well, and yeah. So it was kind of those 3 all mixed together.
Okay. Now I can kind of relate. I started smoking weed and cigarettes at 13.
Yeah,
Like,
I think I was 12 or 13, yeah.
yeah, I was in 7th grade when I first learned how to inhale. I,
Mhm.
um my my friend taught me how to inhale with a black and mild.
Oh, no.
So I immediately tore my throat right up, and I started smoking black and I started drinking at 11. And I started drinking on the weekends when I was 12, 13.
Mhm.
And my parents both, they weren't big drinkers. They knew how to throw a party, but they weren't big drinkers. So they would stock the basement with liquor from these parties. When the parties were over, the leftover liquor would go into the basement, and that's where I came in. And I would steal the liquor and then get drunk. I would either drink in my living room when they're asleep, or I would sneak it up to my bedroom, or it was always hard liquor though. I didn't start drinking beer until I was like a sophomore in high school.
Mhm.
I was always a hard liquor person, even in my 12, 13, 14 years old. I was a hard liquor, mix it with Gatorade, get like a bottle of vodka, mix it with Gatorade, and walk around town,
Yeah.
smoking black and milds, thinking I was cool. And when I was 13, I decided these black and milds are killing my throat. I might as well smoke cigarettes. So that's when I started smoking cigarettes instead. Um, and I still, 25 years later, still smoke to this day, unfortunately. Um, that's a tough one to quit. I've quit drugs,
Yeah.
I've quit alcohol, but I can't put down the cigarettes still. And I don't want it enough, right? Like the
Mhm.
difference between want and needs when it comes into recovery, you have to want it more than you need it. I need to quit smoking cigarettes, of course I do, but I
Yeah.
don't want to quit smoking, so that's why I haven't quit.
Yeah.
With drugs, I needed to stop doing drugs when I first started them, but I didn't want to stop doing them until I was 31, 32 years old. So it's a need and a want, in my opinion, when it comes to recovery and when it comes to addictions. So, you know, you're 13 years old and you start experimenting with both smoking weed, smoking cigarettes, drinking. Does that become like a weekend activity, or is that like,
Um,
because
it's some
you would have been like in 7th or 8th grade when you were 13, right?
yeah, so I think as soon as I hit so it wasn't like a daily thing until I got into my freshman year of high school, and then I started dating this guy, and I like, he lived very close to where I live, and I would sneak over there, like, all the time, and he would always have alcohol or, something, and then it became kind of a daily thing that I was either smoking weed or using alcohol, and eventually it kinda turned into pills, and I got really addicted to, benzos and hydrocodone and Ambien. Those 3, like, I got a prescription for 2 of them, And then I had a boyfriend that dealt hydros. And so like pills became my really big thing. Like also like cold medicine and stuff. And then air duster kind of had a little thing in there at one point, but like the pills were my big thing. And then
Yeah, me.
yeah.
How old are you?
I'm 29.
You're 29. So
Mhm.
this was 15 years ago, roughly. So
Mhm.
around 2008, 2009 is when this is. I'm trying to like place when
Yeah.
all these drugs are okay,
Yeah.
because I had a problem with benzos myself. My relapse was with benzos last summer.
Mhm.
I relapsed on Ativan, and then I relapsed on Valium.
Mhm.
I was clean from benzos for years, and then my dad died, and I got prescribed Ativan, and then I abused the Ativan. I considered that a relapse when I abused it. So what
Mhm.
do? I do? I manipulate my psychiatrist to then give me Valium, and then it didn't take me long before I started abusing that.
Yeah.
So, I totally understand the benzos aspect of how hard they are to quit. Which
Yeah.
two of the so you were prescribed, what were you prescribed?
So I kind of I did some shady shit with pharmacies. So I would visit my doctor every month and he would give me a 3-month prescription. So I would send him to different pharmacies all the time. Because I think you're only allowed to have like 2 benzos prescribed to you at once legally. So I would get Valium, Xanax, Klonopin, and Ambien, which Ambien isn't really a benzo, but yeah, I would get all 4 of those and I'd have all 4 of them at the same time. They'd be gone within a week, all of them. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of missing time
Yeah.
because of being blacked out.
Mhm.
People don't realize how easily you black out when you're on benzos, especially I'm going to assume here you were drinking alcohol with the benzos.
Um, when I was a teenager, yeah. Yeah, I would definitely drink with anything, like, I just did not care. Anything I took, I was drinking, except cold medicine. I was too scared to do it with cold medicine. But definitely with, like, the benzos or the opiates, I was drinking.
Yeah. And the hydros were your introduction to opiates.
Yes, yes. And I loved them. They kinda gave me the opposite effect, like, they gave me energy and almost, like, would let me focus, and I did those for a long time.
Yeah, no, that's the people that are get addicted to that. I mean, I can speak for myself, because my addiction for 10 my worst addiction I had was opiates. It
Mhm.
was the Roxy 30s,
Yeah.
and that was my biggest addiction that I had from 22 until I was 32. Well, 31 and a half. So 9.5 years daily use of Roxy 30s.
Mhm.
And I would drive an hour and a half just to pick up 20 pills and then drive right back again.
Mhm.
And I would be withdrawing my entire ride. And then I would get them. And I used to have straws at all times in my center console, like McDonald's thicker straws,
Yeah.
because I knew which place had the thicker straws. So I would go into McDonald's and just grab them by the handful and put them in my car. And I would bend the straw in half and then put the pills inside of it and then chew on them inside of the straw. And then I could extend the straw and blast it that way into my nose.
Oh, damn.
And I would do like 4 at a time and then drive home. I'd be on the highway in Philadelphia blasting away 30s as I'm like weaving through traffic.
Mhm.
And I remember I knew I had a problem because I was doing like 430s a day at this point, like 2 months in. And I was hanging out with one of my best friends who had just got surgery. He had just gotten like his wisdom teeth taken out. And he was prescribed perk fives. And he took one and he was passed out. And I was thinking, I must have a problem because I have 430s. I have 120 milligrams in me right now, and I'm wide awake. Like
Yeah.
this might be a problem that I should address, but I didn't address it. I just felt like I doubled down. I was like, well, I'm a drug addict. I guess this is my life. This is what it is because I love these pills too much to quit.
Yeah.
When did you graduate from hydros? How old were you?
Um, I let's see. I believe that I was 20 years old when I started using like heroin because I would use oxys or hydros, whatever I could get a hold of at the time. And then I caught a felony for aggravated assault. Um, but
I want to hear about
after,
that.
okay. Basically, what had happened is I had
Every good story starts with what happened was.
I had a boyfriend that was very, very abusive, and he was a lot older than me. He was 15 years older than me, and I met him when I was 18. Um, so he was 33 when I met him, and he was very abusive. He was very narcissistic, but I had actually quit hydros and I was sober besides drinking every now and then. I wasn't doing anything except drinking every now and then. And he had prescribed hydros. He was prescribed them through the VA, 120 a month. And I had told him when I met him, I was like, listen, I have an addiction to those. Like, I have a problem with those. I'm sober right now. I understand that you need them for your pain, but please, like, just try to keep them away from me. Like, lock them up, do whatever you need to. He ended up, I want to say, like 2 weeks after I told him that, he ended up offering me some. Like, he was like, "Oh, do you want some?" Because I think I was telling him like I didn't feel good or something. And he was like, "Oh, well, these will make you feel better." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, they will." And I was brand new to being sober and not even really understanding addiction in the first place. And so I would steal his pills. That's what it led to, is me stealing his pills all the time because I started that addiction back up, and it came back with a vengeance. So he would get 120 pills a month. He probably only took like maybe 20 to 30 of those pills each month. He did not use them very much. But before the end of the month, he would always run out because I would take the rest of them. And it always led to a fight. And what had happened is I had taken my Xanax, taken some hydros. He was getting ready for work one day, and he couldn't find his hydros, and we started getting into a fight. And it basically led to him throwing me down the stairs. And I had braces at the time. My braces, like, my head hit the wall so hard that my wire in my braces came out and like went through my mouth. Um, and I probably wouldn't have done anything, but he stood at the top of the stairs and looked at me and was like, "Do you really think you can beat me?" And I don't know why, but that just set me off. And then I blacked out. And I went to the kitchen, I'd grabbed 2 knives, and then all I remember is falling onto the ground in the living room and breaking one of the knives, and that's all I remember, really. He had then left and called the cops on me, and I went to jail. I actually got charged with aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, but it was dropped down to aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. So, yeah, that's what happened. Apparently, I stabbed him. I don't remember it, but like I said, I blacked out. I was angry, and I was on all these drugs. I was on Ambien, Xanax, and hydros, which are definitely not a good combination. So,
Yeah, I mean, the blackout rage of wanting to hurt somebody, let alone being mixed with other substances, it definitely causes a blackout. Um,
mhm,
I had a guy early on, probably like my 4th episode, actually. I'm at over 200 now, but this is like number 4. And I remember all these episodes all the time. And he stabbed somebody in the neck when he was really drunk and high.
oh no,
And he had heard that the guy had like inappropriately touched a girl. So he took it upon himself to stab him in the neck.
mhm,
And he's like, I don't remember any of it. He's like, all I remember is washing myself off. and them being like, "You just fucking stabbed that guy," and he was like, "Me? I did that," and he served years in jail for it.
Oh my goodness.
Did you get any time for it?
So where it was my first charge ever, they were pretty lenient with me. I got put on probation and that's actually when I started using heroin was right after I got put on probation. Um, but they just made me sit like 2 days in jail for it. Like, I mean, I still have time over my head if I mess up. And I think I have another felony that I caught a few years later, but I do technically have time if I mess up or if I were to catch another charge. But where my record was pretty clean, they were pretty lenient with me because I'd never been in trouble before. I, you know, I was a fairly good kid. I just messed with drugs, but I didn't really do anything. Like I want to say that I used responsibly, if that makes sense. Like I wouldn't drink and drive. I wouldn't go out in public. I would always have somebody there that was either sober or not using nearly as much or was experienced. That way, like if something happened, then someone was there
Yeah.
most of the time. Most of the time, it was just like when I was doing the benzos and the Ambien, I did that all by myself in my room at nighttime and just went to sleep. So
Okay, so you're 20 years old, and
mhm.
you're obviously not with that 33-year-old anymore.
No.
Um, how were you being drug tested in probation?
So I had
Because
the
it
worst.
wasn't a drug related offense. Like I
Um,
was on probation once and I didn't have to do drug tests because it was for theft
yeah.
and not for drug related crime. So I wasn't drug tested the entire time I was on probation.
So I did have so they do like certain stuff when you're a felon. I don't know what kind of probation you were on, but in Idaho they make you do these tests and basically they rate like if you'll reoffend or like if you have a substance abuse problem, blah blah blah. Everyone always tells you to lie, but they can always find out if you're lying on those. So I just always tell the truth. Because I always want help. Like if that's what it's for, I want the help. But anyway, they kind of knew that I had a substance problem mainly because of the medications that my doctor was prescribing me. Because that's information they can access when you're in trouble. And so they kind of were like, okay, she has a substance problem. So we'll drug test her once a month, maybe. All right. I had a PO and I had him for 6 months, 6 or 7 months, and he didn't drug test me once. And I went in one time, I was supposed to get UA'd, and I even told him, I was like, oh yeah, I'm taking pain medicine, like hydros for my teeth. Like, wasn't prescribed them. I just told him that. He didn't UA me, he gave me a breathalyzer. And I was good to go. Like, he was like, oh, you're fine, whatever. And then right after my dad passed away, I got a new PO. And less than a month after my dad died, I ended up going to jail immediately because I didn't have a job and I was hanging out with people that were using and I was using drugs and it was just all bad. Like I just got a ton of violations. So,
Who introduced you to heroin? Because that's quite a jump up from hydrocodone to heroin.
so I had a friend, uh, his name is actually Destri, which is really funny. But I have a friend and I would always buy my pills from him if I couldn't find them or if I didn't have any or if like I was at work and really needed something because I wasn't feeling good. And he would always stop by or he would have pills most of the time. And once I caught that felony, um, he had started using heroin. And, I asked him, I'm like, hey, I'm not doing too good. can you help me out? And he was like, well, I don't have any of those, but I do have something else. So I went and hung out with him and his friends were all shooting up. And I had never done it before. I had never touched a needle before. So he ended up doing it for me. And it was just instant, like, euphoria, amazing. I I
It's like
just
falling in love.
yeah, exactly. Like, it was insane. And I remember he gave me some to take home, like, in a syringe, but I had no idea how to do it. So I ended up going to see him the next day and I was like, you can have this back. I don't know how to do this." So, and I only, before I got convicted of my felony, I probably only did heroin 2 or 3 times. I was mainly smoking weed. Um, and they had introduced me to heroin, but I wasn't like, I was kind of scared of the needle thing. Like, that really kind of turned me off to the idea of using it. And so once I got convicted of my felony, I stopped smoking weed completely. And
Now,
I was
what
like,
was your
well,
felony for?
it was my aggravated assault felony.
Okay.
So yeah, this was like all in the same timeline. Like, I was charged with it and then I got convicted of it. So yeah. And yeah, after I got convicted, I was like, well, opiates only stay in your system for like 2 to 3 days, sometimes 5, just depends. And I'm like, oh, so I could, do that. And, I didn't really understand addiction. Again, like, it wasn't something that I had ever seen someone go through, or I had even really heard about. Even like Dare, like when I did Dare in middle school, I don't remember really talking about addiction. I just remember drugs are bad.
And it's
Um,
crazy. It's because of weed being so decriminalized, or in so criminalized. I mean,
mhm,
because if you were allowed, if weed was legal, like alcohol is, and if you were allowed to piss dirty for weed, you probably never would have got hooked on opiates because you would have had
exactly.
weed so that you could smoke weed.
Yeah.
Um, and instead, you knew you had to have clean urine from weed, so you quit smoking weed and you
Yeah.
graduate to fucking shooting up.
Mhm.
And you're not alone in that. I have a friend that got convicted of getting weed in the mail, and he got 5 years of probation.
Oh my gosh.
And he's had to quit smoking weed because he was being drug tested every month without fail because of having a drug related offense. So
Mhm.
he quit smoking weed, and what does he get introduced to instead is Roxy 30s. And then he goes on a bender for like 8 years on oxys. So, and it's all because he wasn't allowed to smoke weed for 5 years.
Yeah.
And I strongly feel if if weed could be in his system during a drug test, like alcohol can be, then he
Mhm.
never would have gotten hooked on oxys.
Yeah.
Luckily, he didn't lose his life over it, but people are losing their lives over it, and because you're not alone when it comes to that. So many people switch over to opiates because it only lasts 2 or 3 days in your system. When I was on probation, I quit smoking weed, and because again, just in case I got UA'd,
Mhm.
and I was doctor shopping, so I had a script for 30s and I had a script for bars, and so I could fail a drug test for oxy 30s, or I could fail a drug test for benzos because I had prescriptions for both of them. So
Mhm.
it's fucked the way the system works, and that's why it needs to be decriminalized across the entire country. This way,
Yeah.
people can have it in their system for probation and not have to find something else to substitute it with.
Yeah.
Um, because getting charged with a felony, especially your first one, is a traumatic event in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's trauma right there. And what's a good way to deal with trauma is smoke a little bit of weed.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and plus, you said your dad just recently passed away too.
Yeah, he had cancer, and so we kind of expected it, but like, yeah, he passed away and then I got a brand new PO and went straight to jail. So,
My dad passed last June. My dad had colon cancer.
yeah, that's what my dad had too.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Mhm.
he was stage 4 when they caught it,
Oh, damn.
and he lasted about a year with it before he passed. I think like 13 months is how long he lasted from his
Mhm.
diagnosis. So, and that's when my relapse happened, like I said. So I can definitely relate to that event happening, and because I was close with my dad, and it sounds like you were close to your dad too.
Yeah.
Um, so your dad passes, you get hooked on heroin, and now you're on probation for how long did you give probation for?
I think I got, let me see. I think I only got a year probation on that first charge. And
Did you violate probation at all in that year?
yes. So right after I got convicted, I started using heroin. They weren't drug testing me. And then my dad passed away. So I got convicted of the charge in August of 2016. And then my dad passed away December 29th of 2016. And so, like, right after that period, I started using just like heavily. Like, I did not give a crap at all. Did not care. I just was you like it was one of those things where it was like, this shot might kill me. Oh well, you know, when you just don't care anymore. And then I in that time I got a new PO, and all my violations, I had like 8 violations total. I can't remember all of them, but I think one was like having a weapon, associating with people that were either on probation or using, um, dirty UAs, um, not having a job, not paying fines. Like, there's a bunch of violations, and so I ended up going to jail.
How long did you go to jail for?
So I was in jail for a little over a month. I ended up signing up for drug court, and I got approved to yak court because I think I was only 21 or 22 at the time. I think I was 22, or I was turning 22. I can't remember. But it was called yak court. It was young adult court, and I was on that for like a year and a half, and I did really, really good. I had relapsed in the beginning once I got out of jail. Like, the day I got out of jail, I used. And
Were you more inclined to shoot heroin once you got out of jail?
yes, I didn't want to quit. That, it wasn't something that I wanted to stop. I had no intention of stopping, and I knew that. I knew that deep inside. I knew that. Like, the day I got out, I made plans as soon as, I had my phone in my hands, you know, and I met up with 2 of my buddies, and we just went and got high. So,
Did you go through withdrawals when you went to jail?
a little bit, not as much as I have, like, in the recent relapses. I don't know, maybe
Not enough
because,
to
like,
scare you.
yeah, like, I mean, definitely I suffered with the insomnia part for sure, and, like, the stomach stuff, but it wasn't as bad as, like, my more recent ones where I've withdrawn. I don't know, and maybe it was because I didn't really understand withdrawals, and it was kind of like a mind over matter type thing, because I never really experienced them before, and I probably had, but I didn't really understand. I was just really irritable, mostly. I was just pissed off at everyone. I was trying to sleep all the time, and people were yelling because, it's jail, and yeah.
No, it's definitely a lot of mind over matter when it comes to opiate withdrawal. Um,
Mhm.
I remember the last 3 years of my addiction, I would wake up every day withdrawing,
Yeah.
and I would need at least one perk 30 to like soothe my stomach, because you know how it's those tying knots in your stomach. It feels like,
Mhm.
um, and I would wake up feeling that way every morning, and I would need to like do a line in order to feel better. And but when I got sober finally, I went all the way to I'm from South Jersey, right outside of Philly.
Mhm.
and I was living in Amish country when for the last 3 years of my addiction. And I was driving from there all the way to South Jersey. Like I said, about an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on Philly traffic. And every morning I woke up in pain. And when I decided to go to rehab in Los Angeles, where I didn't know anybody, I barely had any withdrawals. I did not take subs. I did not do methadone. I didn't do anything. And I barely had any withdrawals. And I
Mhm.
really feel like it was mind over matter of like, I can't get them even if I wanted them.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And I think that like really helped. I mean, I went through some withdrawals and I was offered Suboxone and I told them like, no, I need it to hurt because I don't want to come back here again. So I believe it can be mind over matter when it comes to opiates. Alcohol and benzos can literally kill you. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But opiates might feel like you're dying, but you're definitely not.
Yeah, it
So
just sucks.
yeah, it just sucks. So in like you said, you got out within a month and you started using right away again.
Yeah, and so, like I said, I got signed up for drug court, and I used the day I got out, and, they just put me back in jail for a week, and, it kinda clicked in my head finally, like, "Okay, like, at least get through this part. Maybe it'll change my life." I don't know. And so, when I got out, I stayed sober, I got a job, and I did really, really good on drug court. They have, like, they called it an A list, and it was like if you do good, so you go to court every week depending on what phase you're on, and when I was on phase 1 and 2, I would go every week or every other week, and I was on the A list almost every single week, you know? And that just means you're doing really good. We don't need to speak to you. The judge doesn't need to talk to you about anything particular. You're just doing really, really good. And eventually, I had gotten, I was being a mentor, I was helping other people with their addiction. I had made some really good friends. I was running these things called pro socials, which are just like groups that are just for the clients. And, I was doing really good and I wanted to become a recovery coach. And so I was kind of working towards that. And once I hit phase 4 and they were like, okay, we're getting ready to graduate you, I was like, I'm not ready. So I stayed on phase 4 each month, or each phase was about 3 months. So about a year total is usually what it is. And I was on for about, I want to say, so I was on probably about 20 months, a little less than 2 years, but almost 2 years. And the last two phases I spent like 6 months each on. And the other ones I went up immediately. I was scared to graduate because I was like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm like, I am going to go from all this structure and all this routine and all this help and to nothing, you know? Like I won't have this anymore. So I kept telling them I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. Finally, they were like, Destri, we have to graduate you. Like we need room for other people to come on this program. So I was like, okay, I understand. So after I graduated, I want to say about 2 weeks after I graduated, I started drinking. Not heavily, like, not every night, but every other night probably, and it would only be, like, 1 big can of, like, beer or something, and then I started using kratom as well, and, I wasn't getting drug tested. I was still on probation, but I wasn't getting drug tested. They wouldn't UA me, and I was dating a guy at the time, and he had graduated same day as me. We graduated together, and we lived together, and he did kinda construction stuff, and he had worked in a town over, so he would go out of town to go to work, and I guess while he was working, when, he would stay there for, like, a couple days, he had been taking speed, and so, he was kinda popping pills, I was drinking and taking kratom, oh, and he was smoking weed too. I didn't really smoke weed. I did one time with my best friend, and that was it. And then, but he got home one night and he was out of weed And, I didn't want to drink. And, we were just talking. We're like, what should we do? And this was around October, the beginning of October, I want to say. And he was like, you know, well, we could get high. I'm like, the only thing I can find is heroin. And he's like, that's fine. So it literally took nothing. Like, it was just like, heroin, cool, let's go get it. And we did, and we started using again. He ended up UAing for his PO because he was on misdemeanor probation and was dirty. And so his PO made him go back onto like the program, like a phase 5 thing. And they didn't drug test me. And so the only reason they started drug testing me is I had a really bad gallbladder attack and I went to the hospital and they gave me hydros. Well, I wasn't taking them the way I was supposed to. And so my PO put me on that phase 5 thing as well. But I was still using heroin every day, and I would test clean because I was diluting my UAs and using B vitamins to make them like the yellow color. And the tests at the time couldn't tell if it was dilute unless you labbed it. And they hardly ever labbed it unless you were dirty for something. So I was getting away with that for a while until I ended up overdosing. And when I overdosed, the first time, uh, I told my PO, so they put me on a really strict schedule. Like, you go to these groups every single day, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I just didn't care anymore at that point. Like, I was like, I already did this. I'm not doing this again. And so I was drinking, using. I was still going to UAs, but I was dirty and I didn't care. And finally, they were just like, okay, we're just going to lock you up and send you to prison, basically. So I went on my first rider in, let's see, I got there in April of 2019.
So your overdose, who were you with?
It was this friend of mine,
You don't have to say names,
Keenan.
so it's a friend of
Oh,
yours.
yeah, he won't care. But yeah, he had just like broken up with his girlfriend, and me and my boyfriend were not living together and not really together anymore because we were both in trouble and it was causing a lot of problems in our relationship. And, I went to go hang out with him and he threw me in a bath with water, which woke me up, like, I actually overdosed with him twice, and the second time he called an ambulance, which was very, I wouldn't have done it like if it were me, but I mean, it was if someone else was overdosing, I would definitely take them to the hospital, but like at the time, like I was, you when you get mad because you got Narcan or something, like people that get upset. Yeah, that's kind of how I felt. I was like, why did you call them? Like, now the cops are going to show up. Luckily, no cops came, so that was good at least. But yeah, that was the
Was it
overdose I ended up
was it
getting.
fentanyl you were overdosing on or heroin?
It was heroin, but I'm pretty sure this was around the time when fentanyl started kind of coming into the scene and being mixed with heroin. I know that that was a big thing that was starting to go on,
Yeah,
but
because it was
yeah.
2019. You said.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's when I think it was like 2018 when it started coming into like the smaller cities.
Yeah.
I mean now like Philadelphia doesn't have any heroin left. It's
Mhm.
all
Yeah.
it's all fentanyl and xylazine, horse tranquilizer.
Yeah.
And it's, you're either getting fentanyl or you're getting horse tranquilizer. And that's what it's going around on the streets in Philly right now. Like I grew up, do you ever hear of Kensington?
Yes, actually.
Yeah, it's like the biggest open air drug market in the country. That's
Mhm.
like 15 minutes from where I grew up.
Oh, damn.
So it's like The Walking Dead with zombies over there, just homeless and hopeless. And nobody wants to get clean around there until they do. I've had a bunch of people on my show that are from Kensington, and they got clean eventually. So, there is still hope. They're not completely
Yeah.
hopeless. Um, so you overdosed with your friend a couple times, but you were
Mhm.
more mad than like upset.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
And then
wasn't
you got thrown in
necessarily
jail.
mad. Huh?
Then you got thrown in jail.
Yeah, so I ended up going to the hospital because the ambulance took me there. They put me in a psych ward for a couple days, and then as soon as I got out, my PO arrested me. So I didn't have to go through withdrawals really because they gave me stuff at the hospital to help me with withdrawals. And I wasn't using that heavily, so withdrawals were not very bad at all. Um, but then I went to jail and I tried to get on to another drug court program. It was called Wood Pilot. And basically how people describe it is like drug court on steroids. It's really difficult. It's not it's not easy at all. And I think there's only like 6% of people that actually graduate and finish that and stay sober. But I did get accepted to it, but they were like, you have to go on a rider first before you can go do this program. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm like, I'll go on a rider or I'll do the program, but I'm not doing both. So they sent me on a rider. Um, I did the programming, I did excellent, and then I got out, let's see, I got out, I think November 5th was the day I got out of jail because they take you up to the prison. They don't do it anymore because of COVID, but how they did it before was they took you to the prison and then you'd go back to the jail that you came from and you'd see your judge or you'd be a book and release. I was a book and release. And so I didn't get out for like 5 days because of the weekend and whatever. But yeah, and then after I got out, I was doing really good. I was working out every day, and then I got a job, and then once I kinda started getting money, I it kinda triggered me. And I was like, "Oh, I can use, it's fine." And I hit up a friend, and I knew she was still using, and she had sold to me before, so I hit her up, and she sold to me, and it went downhill from there, and I was using I wanna say I started using the very end of November of 2019, and I was using that was probably one of my worst using phases because I've gotten sober a few times, but I always go back, and so, you know, I I started using again. I started dating this guy. Um, he didn't use. He drank. He was an alcoholic. I mean, he still is an alcoholic, but we, started dating. Um, and he had 2 kids that I adored. But I think he always knew that I was using, but I don't think he like wanted to accept it. So it was kind of like he kind of turned a blind eye to it. Like he pretended he didn't know, basically. And so, I was using really, really heavily. I eventually in 2020, April 2020, I caught another felony. I got a possession charge. I was at my friend's house and he was living with this other couple and we had just gone to the store to get him some groceries and stuff and some food and I had drove him back and we're all hanging out inside. I'm waiting for him to hook me up for helping him out and I'm looking around and I kind of go out into the living room and I see that there's a cop at the door talking to the other guy that lives there. I'm like, "Oh, fuck." So I go back in the bedroom and I just kind of chill. I'm like, "What do I do?" And they they call me out. They look at my tongue and they're like, "Oh, you've been smoking weed." I'm like, "No, I haven't." At that point I hadn't smoked weed in probably like years. But, cops know everything. Um, and eventually it got to the point where they just looked through my car and my friend had put his scale and baggies and his 2 grams of heroin in my car. And I was so, 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 so lucky they did not get me with trafficking because they easily could have. and the cop was one of the cops anyway, because there was like 6 or 7 police officers there. The officer that talked to me that signed like the ticket and the felony or whatever, because they released me. They let me go because it was 2020 and COVID, they didn't have room in the jails and they didn't want people getting sick and they had a lot of restrictions. But he told me, he was like, "We know this isn't yours, but nobody else will own up to it and it's in your car. So I have to charge you with something." So I did get a possession charge. My friend actually did try to take the charge. Like he contacted his attorney to contact my attorney to, get that charge taken off my record, but they were like, "There's nothing we can do," even though he admitted it was his. So it was really stupid, but it's okay. Like I'm 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 fine, He ended up going to prison anyway because of his previous charges. Like everyone there got arrested except me. Like I got a new charge, but I didn't get arrested. Everyone else had warrants. But the funny thing is, the whole reason the cops showed up is because that guy and his girlfriend were fighting. So she called the cops to report a disturbance. And then she went and hid like in a bush nearby because she had drugs on her and she was high and she had warrants and they found her and she ended up going to prison. Like it was really stupid, but yeah. Out of everyone there, I was the only one that didn't get arrested. So but I remember how shitty that felt. So that was in April. And so I was kind
Yeah,
of dealing
that's like
with
right when COVID really hit because
mhm,
um well COVID hit March 12th of 2020. So COVID
mhm,
was like really at its beginning to peak by the time
yeah,
April rolled around. But yeah, I had quit drinking February 29th of 2020.
yeah,
So I had quit drinking on Leap Day in 2020. Like I just celebrated 4 years on Leap Day in this past year.
yeah,
Um, so you know, um, I remember how like I couldn't go to meetings or anything like that when I got sober. My wife got sober with me, so
mhm,
we got through it together. But now I go to meetings every day. Um, but okay, so it's April 2020. Did you end up? You were on probation, right, when this happened?
mhm, yeah. And my PO was pissed that I caught a new charge. And so I went to court the first time and they kind of were just like, "Okay, you have another court date." And my attorney told me, so my next court date I think was in May, June, I think July or August. And, I was using really heavily and he was like, "I tried to get it so you don't go to jail, but the judge really wants you to go to jail and so does your PO." And I was like, "Okay." So then at this point he was like, "Well, if you don't go, I can't advise you to not go, but you will have a warrant." So I just didn't go to jail or I just didn't go to court. And so I had a warrant out for my arrest. And probably 2 months later, my car broke down and it was kind of in the middle of town and I pushed it to the side of the road. Well, the people that owned the place where it was parked, they contacted me and I was gonna come get it. I had just like I had to get ready and figure out a ride there and stuff, but I was getting ready to go get it and then she ended up calling the cops and telling them that I needed to come get my car. So that was really cool. They arrested me right then and there. Um, so I went to jail for 2 weeks and then I got bonded out. My boyfriend's mom bonded me out. And after that, I, went back to using. And my boyfriend actually started using with me. And then I got pregnant. And so I had previously in my life, I had had miscarriages, quite a few. And so it wasn't like a huge, like, "Oh, okay, I'm going to have a baby." Like it was kind of like, "Oh, okay, this is probably not going to go full term. So, I continued to use, my boyfriend continued to use. And then, it probably hit about 3, 4 months being pregnant. And I was like, okay, I think, this baby's going to go full term. And I was going to stop cold turkey, but I was so scared that I would end up killing the baby or miscarrying. And so I was too scared to tell my PO, and I was too scared to ask for help. I was too scared to tell my OB. So I just kept using, and I was trying to like taper down or whatever or do Suboxone, but I could never get past more than like 12 hours of withdrawals because once she started moving, like I could not, it was insane. Like she would withdraw worse than me because you could tell she would just go crazy in my belly, and it would just it was so hard. Um, Eventually, I ended up getting another PO, a new PO, and I went in to meet him. And I was about 7 months pregnant, and they UA'd me. I was dirty. Um, they sent me home, and then the next day they were like, "Hey, you need to come in." I was like, "Fuck, I'm going to jail." You know, they're gonna make me withdraw in jail, and I'm gonna lose this baby. So I was not going in. I was avoiding them, and they were texting me and calling me, and they were like, "Listen, we're not thinking jail." They're like, "We want to get you help. We have a bed for you at Stewards of Recovery in Idaho Falls, inpatient. Let's get you there." And so I went to probation. They got me all signed up and everything. And they were like, "Hey, go there right now. Do not go anywhere else. Go straight to Stewards." So I went there. I got checked in. They took me to my OB. The next day, I got put on Subutex. Um, and I was put on, I think, 16 milligrams of Subutex. And by the
That's a
time
lot.
my daughter, yeah, by the time my daughter was born, I was able to go all the way down. Like I was weaning myself down, and I was trying to get off completely, but the doctor had like they were in transition of getting a new doctor. So there was like a whole couple weeks where like I wasn't able to see the doctor. So I got all the way down to 2 milligrams before she was born. And I only had 2 months to do it. So there was a little bit of withdrawal within it, but you know,
Yeah, I'm
um,
all for Suboxone maintenance, but I
mhm,
feel like it gets overprescribed. Like you don't need 8 milligrams or 16 milligrams a day.
mhm,
You
yeah,
can just take it in pieces, and if you still feel shitty, take another piece.
yeah,
But every time I try to get clean with Suboxone, I was only taking a quarters of it
yeah,
as opposed to the entire strip or the entire pill.
yeah,
And then I would wait until I started feeling withdrawals again, take another little piece, feel a little bit of relief, and then they were few and far between. Every time I would have more, it would be less and less. You know what I
mhm,
mean? So like I feel like it's definitely overprescribed, and it
yeah,
sounds like you were doing it the right way, weaning down from the beginning.
yeah. And they were really worried that I was weaning down so fast, but I was like, it's fine. I feel fine. I can tell she's okay. Like, I don't feel her going crazy. Like, yeah, sometimes she moves a little bit more, but she's fine compared to when I was withdrawing. And I'm kind of going through the same thing right now. I'm on Suboxone because I was on Suboxone before I got pregnant, and I'm pregnant right now. So I'm kind of going through the same thing. I'm tapering down. But anyway, so I was in rehab and I had to go be induced. And so I got induced. I had my daughter. She did really good the first day. Um, and then the second day, she kind of went through a little bit of withdrawal. I was trying to breastfeed her, but I just couldn't produce. So that way she could have gotten some of the Suboxone, Subutex in her system to not withdraw as much. But she ended up having to go to the NICU for a couple hours. They didn't have to give her anything like methadone. They didn't have to do anything. They just kind of monitored her, and then she was fine after a few hours. So, I mean, it still sucked watching her go through that. Like, she was just crying, and you could tell she was in pain, and it was really sad. So that's part of why I'm trying to get completely off before this baby is born. Just because I saw my daughter go through that. And um, but while I was in the hospital, I don't know what it was. I just had this immense, like, such an intense urge to use. Like, I hit up a friend, and I think it was just because, like, I wasn't really in rehab, but I was still kind of in rehab, and, like, no one would know because they didn't drug test that often when I was in inpatient. They drug tested maybe once a month, and so, like, no one would know if I used, you know? It was kind of that mentality. And so I was hitting up people. I was like, "Yeah, I'm at the hospital. Come bring me stuff." And luckily, I didn't go through with it because I probably would have overdosed and it would not have been good. But yeah, I went. So my daughter went into foster care for 30, less than 30 days, just because I was still an inpatient. They didn't want her going home with her dad yet because he was still dirty for marijuana. And so she went into foster care for a little bit. I got to see her Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I didn't get to see her on the weekends while I was still inpatient. So 2 hours a day, basically, I got to see her. And after I got out of inpatient, they made me go live in a safe and sober housing. Um, she got to go home with her dad. And then we both had to sign up for another drug court. It was called Family Drug Court. It's where you have an open CPS case. And so we both signed up for that. We both got accepted. We both started doing that. And we were both doing really, really well. Um, and once it hit, so we're doing sober, we're doing the sober thing, we're working, we're doing everything that we need to, go into groups. And then I don't know exactly what came over me, but I was working one day and I'm trying to fix. Oh crap! Sorry, I almost hung up on you. My phone is just being a pain in the butt right now. It's not staying still. Okay. Anyway, I was working and this older gentleman was checking out and he had dropped a pill on the floor and I don't think he noticed. And I picked it up and it was a morphine, like nothing crazy, but I had kept it. And then my daughter's birthday, I took it because I was just so overwhelmed with like guilt and shame just because, what I put her through, And so I ended up taking that pill. It didn't really do anything because I was on Suboxone anyways. I don't know why I did that, but I took that pill and then I told on myself, and they were pretty lenient with me my first time, relapsing, especially because I had gone a long time without relapsing. And, they were pretty lenient. They were like, okay, let's just get you in some extra groups. They didn't send me to jail. But after that, I tried fentanyl. And I had done fentanyl before, but I never liked it. But like I would stop taking my Suboxone for a couple days and then I would go and find fentanyl and I just started smoking fentanyl. And it wasn't a daily thing. It was probably like once every couple weeks, but I just kept getting in trouble. I kept going to jail. I kept getting community service. And finally I want to say it was in November of 2022. Yeah. They finally were like, okay, we're done with you. And they threw me in jail and I got terminated from family court. And so, luckily, the guy that I was dating, he, was doing really good and he stayed doing good and he graduated and we got the CPS case closed because he did well. So I'm very thankful that, he was able to do that because we wouldn't have our daughter if he didn't do that. Um, so yeah, I ended up going on a second rider, and that one was only a few months. I think I was up in Boise for 5 months this time instead of like 9 months. Um, and I got out recently. I got out last year in August, I believe August 29th of 2023. Immediately 2 days after I started smoking fentanyl again. Immediately. And then, I told you I ended up telling my PO about it. Um, the main reason why, like when I was nodding out in that bathroom for 2 hours downstairs, I kept thinking for some reason that I had my daughter with me, that my daughter was upstairs by herself. And I kept trying to get up, and like I just literally kept falling down, like falling out, nodding out. I could not even walk. Like I was so messed up. And that was the main reason I told my PO that I was done. I was like, I can't do this. My daughter needs me. So, um, yeah. And then I've been sober since then.
Is this the longest amount of time you've had in a while?
Yeah, I think the first drug court that I did, I was a little bit longer, but yeah, I think this is the longest I've had in a long time.
Do you
And
go to meetings at all?
I still actually go to like treatment. I I do classes and groups and counseling, like addiction counseling, and I have a recovery coach. Um, I'm not the biggest fan of meetings in my area just because we don't have a lot of places to go. And the one place that I used to go to, there's just a lot of
Stigma
it's
against Suboxone.
yeah, yeah, there's a lot of it's very stigmatized in this area. Like addiction is very, very frowned upon in this area. And I
Check
mean
out
it's
Zoom
very
meetings. Zoom meetings saved my life
yeah.
because where I live in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania,
Mhm.
um, AA is pretty much got a footing in. Like there's a bunch of AA groups, but NA is non-existent where I live.
Mhm.
And AA, I'm not allowed to talk about drugs. I have to relate
Mhm.
everything as it confides to alcohol, is what the literature says.
Yeah.
So, which was all well and good early on in my new recovery for the past 6.5 months, 7 months. But the problem is my relapse was because of drugs, not alcohol. I still haven't had a sip of alcohol in over 4.5 years.
Mhm.
So that is the least of my worries right now. My big worry is drugs. So I found a Zoom meeting every day at noon that I go to. It's based out of Providence, Rhode Island. And I've been doing that meeting for the last 4 or 5 months every single day at noon. And on the weekends, I do Gamblers Anonymous on Zoom.
Oh, okay.
So because I found myself gambling a lot over the summer and I quit gambling July 13th. So it's been I just celebrated 100 days a couple weeks ago. And but I find a lot of good recovery in those meetings and it's not stigmatized. Like the meeting I go to is not stigmatized at all and it's a really good group of people. But yeah, I would look into Zoom meetings because I do get a lot from it. I hear a good message all the time.
Mhm.
I'm not saying you have to. I'm just
Yeah.
saying it might help. It's
Yeah.
helped me a lot. So I would definitely you can find Zoom NA meetings all over the world at
Mhm.
any time of the day. I just prefer to do them at noon. It gives me a good I work 11 and a half hours a day. So
Mhm.
breaking my day up in the middle where I do a Zoom meeting for an hour, it really sets the tone for the rest of my day because I could have a really shitty morning, but then my afternoon go very well. Um,
Mhm.
Now you're pregnant again?
Yes, I am 27 weeks. So,
Almost there.
yeah, getting there.
Same guy?
No, I so my ex broke up with me when I was in prison. He left me for another girl. Super sad story, actually. She ended up getting into a car wreck when she was drunk and passed away. Yeah. So that's like he started drinking again, which, like I get it. It's stuff like that is super hard. So I feel really bad for him, and I hope that he gets better. But
Do
yeah,
you have
like
custody of your daughter?
we share custody. We have split custody. I mean, we don't even have like a legal agreement to anything. We might have to because we did find out she has severe autism. So we might have to like do a custody agreement just to kind of deal with insurance and stuff. But other than that, like I know he wouldn't keep her from me, especially if I'm doing well, and I would never keep her from him either. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
Well, I'm glad to hear you're doing so well now because you've had quite the story and quite the ride with your riders and your probation and your violations and your relapses. And I use relapses and not relapse because you had a few, but it
mhm.
really feels like you got your head on your shoulder when it comes to, eye on the prize
Yeah,
of having continued sobriety this time around.
yeah.
Like you're weaning yourself down from the subs. Are you doing the strips?
I do the pills just because they're a little bit easier for me. The strips just make me nauseous, and where I'm pregnant, like I'm already nauseous all the time. So yeah,
Well,
the
I'm
pills
glad to
are a
see you're
little bit
doing so
easier.
good, Destri.
Thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate you
I
coming on and being so honest too. I know how that's tough to kind of relive that too.
Yeah, but I wish that, I had known more about addiction when I was new to it and didn't understand it. Like I know that when my daughter gets older, I'm going to have to explain it to her, and I want her to understand, that it is the problem in her family, and her mom struggles with it, and I want her to be aware of the possibilities, because I wish that I was told that, because like even kind of like I said earlier, in Dare, like, I do not remember them talking about addiction. I remember them
No,
talking about, like,
about
"Oh,
drugs.
yeah, this can happen if you use drugs," or blah, 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 but they never talked about, like, the actual physical and mental addiction that happens to you, and, like, how it changes you, and just everything that it does. Because
Yeah,
I think sorry, go ahead.
I was saying we had to explain to our kid what high was a few weeks ago. Our kid's 10,
Mhm,
and he's my stepson, but my wife is a recovering alcoholic, and um, we were watching Bob's Burgers.
mhm,
We're a big Bob's family. We watch it to fall asleep. He watches it to fall asleep. And there was an episode where Bob gets really high,
mhm.
and he's like, "What is high?" And we explained it to him, but we didn't like pussyfoot around the explanation. We
Yeah,
were honest with him about what it is because I feel like if you lie or you try to hide something, that's when they start seeing right through you and they start realizing like this isn't what they're saying it is.
exactly. Yeah. When I was with my ex, the one that had the 2 younger kids, like, one of those his daughter still calls me mom, like, she loves me. In fact, we're having a play date on Saturday, like, I'm still part of their lives, but I remember she would ask me, like, "Why do you go to jail? Like, what are drugs? What do you love drugs more than me?" And it's really hard to explain those things to kids, but being as honest as you can with them is super important, especially because their real mom was also an addict, like, so it's like they have their dad, they have their mom, they have, me, even though we're not blood related, but they do see what I do, you know they have these addicts in their life, and it's very important for them to understand addiction at least a little bit,
Yep.
as they're getting older, and understand what it can do to you. Because I know I wish I had known, but I don't think my parents really even understood it either, you
Yeah.
know?
No,
Because
they were my parents were more like you have to never use drugs, and that was
Mhm,
don't ever do drugs and never explain why,
mhm,
and all they would say the same with dare, like you were saying. All it all it really is them saying don't say no to drugs, but they're
mhm,
not like say no to drugs because
yeah,
not just they're bad for you, but they're bad for you because of addiction. And addiction, you'll lose everything. You'll lose your self-respect, you'll lose family, friends, and you'll
yeah,
lose yourself.
yeah. If it doesn't kill you, like, you either end up in a casket or behind bars, those are the 2 outcomes when you're an addict, like, majority of the time, that's what it's gonna lead to, is one of those options, whether it's years down the road or immediately. Like,
What
that's eventually what's gonna happen.
what they say in NA is jails, institutions, and death or death.
Mhm. Yeah.
And they NA, and this is why I like it so much. They also say one is too many and a thousand is never enough.
Yep.
Alcohol is a drug. Period. They can say I can talk about alcohol in an NA meeting. I can talk about
Mhm.
drugs, and because I still get not the urge to drink, but like alcohol was such a big part of my story early on before I discovered drugs that like I still get the ideation of, well, what if I had a little bit? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? But that kind of it's few and far between now that I'm 4.5 years away from it.
Mhm.
Coming up on 5 years. Yeah, it's been more than 4.5 now. It's coming up on 5 years soon, which I
Mhm.
never thought I would ever say that I'm 5 years without a drink. With
Yeah.
yeah, never thought I would say that. So, and I haven't touched an opiate in 6 years.
That's
So,
amazing.
you know, my relapse was with weed and benzos.
Mhm.
And it is what it is. I had a medical marijuana card and I went from smoking medicinally to smoking all day, every day when my dad passed.
Mhm.
So that's my relapse right there.
Yeah.
And then the benzos, like I said earlier. So
Yeah.
thank you again, Destri, so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I love, being able to share my story.
And we met in the Dark Side of the Spoon.
Yes, I love that group.
That group is a trip. Every
It
time
is, it
I
is.
log on Facebook, it's like at the top of my feed of
Yeah,
whatever's posted that day. So
yeah.
thank you again. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.